What's up everyone, Adrian here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about mobile photography. So, over the years, I've used a lot of camera equipment. I've used DSLRs, I've used mirrorless cameras, I've used a wide variety of lenses, and I've also sunk in a lot of money into the associated gear with this kind of material. Tripods, backpacks, laptops, computer monitors, and all the accessories in between. Now, this isn't to say that spending so much money on this type of equipment is going to make you a better photographer. What I'm trying to drive home with this video is how mobile photography can make you a better photographer by working with a couple things. One, you're balling on a major budget. Two, you're creating with a lot of speed and convenience and interchangeability between not only your lenses, but your gear as well. So I'm going to talk to you about ways that I use mobile photography to grow as a photographer and also just practice my different disciplines, and also just talk about how my gear integrates well with each other and some takeaways that you can go ahead and use if you're trying to develop your kit at the same time. I'm also going to talk a little bit more about how I edit some of my photos. There's not going to be a full-on editing tutorial, but I will mention how I use some apps to my advantage and how they interchange and work seamlessly with each other. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about these guys. So this guy over here, I have the Samsung S25 Ultra and I have the Samsung S22 Ultra, and I've got these phones quite a couple years apart. The Samsung S25 Ultra I've only picked up this year, and the Samsung S22 Ultra I've had since its launch. So I'm going to get into a little bit about why I stuck with the Samsung phones. Granted, this is not a sponsored video. However, if you do want to use some Samsung phones, go ahead and drop into the description below. I also have a gear page of my most up-to-date gear, and those include my affiliate links. So you can go ahead and buy yourself some really nice stuff without an extra cost to you, and it helps directly support the channel. The other thing too that I want to talk about is just some channel updates later on in the video and just some things to look forward to later on in the year, so stick around for that. With that all in mind, let's go ahead and jump right into the video itself. Starting off with point number one, like I mentioned, you can go ahead and ball on a major budget when it comes to creating with a mobile phone. Now, I've used many different types of cameras, many different types of lenses. One of my favorite ones over the years has been the Canon R8. Not particularly this setup, the Sigma 35mm lens with the Canon RF adapter. However, I've used this camera to a wide extent, and I've only recently, which I'm recording on right now, the Canon R6 Mark II, mainly for my hybrid setup. But let's talk about the barriers to entry when it comes to getting into photography itself. So when it comes to buying all this gear, it can cost a lot of money, and it can be a big money pit. So this camera at this time of the video, the body itself costs about like $1,500, maybe even $1,300, whereas with the lens itself, I think it comes around to roughly like $750 or so, more or less. Even the camera that I'm shooting on, the R6 Mark II, at the time of the video, I think it's come around to like $1,800 or $1,900, where at initial launch it was well over $2,000. So the cost can quickly add up, and if you don't have a lot of money to spend, then it can be hard to not only get the bodies but get the lenses that you need. Granted, you can start off with kit lenses too, which is an excellent option. I myself have used a Canon T2i Rebel for quite a while when I was starting out, and then over the course of time, as I've got different jobs, started earning more income, I've spent my money more on camera equipment and gear. And it wasn't until like I think a couple months or maybe even less than a year getting into the photography game, I've used a Canon T6. Now, phone photography nowadays has progressed quite a lot. I had the Samsung Galaxy S4 for quite a while, then I had the S6, the S8, as well as the S22 Ultra, which I currently still have in my kit, and now the Samsung S25 Ultra. When it comes to balling on a budget, there's a lot of things that are going for these kinds of cameras. You have 5 cameras to choose from with the highest tiered model. Granted, if you go ahead and go with like some of the other models like the regular Samsung S25 or 25 Plus, or so, as I'm talking about the S22 Ultra, you can go ahead and downgrade your camera depending on what your needs are. I like to have the most freedom and flexibility when it comes to my cameras. So I picked this one up earlier this year after using a trade-in value over at AT&T. That part right there is not sponsored, but I do want to talk about it a little bit because it kind of plays into balling on a budget. Like I mentioned, I had the S4, the S6, and the S8, and I was able to get both these cameras for an incredible trade-in value over at AT&T. For this phone, I got about like $1,000 off by trading in my S8. Granted, for this phone over here, the S22 Ultra, I was able to get this phone for, I believe, $1,000 too, or like $800 after trading in my S6. When it comes to trade-in value, I feel like Samsung has some really good trade-in values, enough for me to stick around, in addition to some other features that I'll talk about a little bit later on as well. Balling on a budget, getting these cameras, you have so much more flexibility and adaptability with these kinds of lenses and bodies over a course period of time. It's going to be a really nice one out there creating. I'll share a couple examples of what I created over the course of years, both with this phone as well as this phone. And if you aren't following me already on my Instagram page, Kuya_Adrian, over the past week I've shared some tips and tricks and breakdowns on how I took certain photos for different types of photography, which kind of bleeds into my other point. You can go ahead and take this phone out anywhere and create anything everywhere at any time. So I've used both these phones for landscape, for videos. One of my biggest projects that I've taken with this phone, the S22 Ultra, is being able to take this out to Japan with my homie Emilio last October, and having the ability to just whip this thing out, create, and as I go was just really nice, instead of having to worry about what kind of gear that I need to bring at a given time, and also consider like what kind of settings I need to use. So talking to a little bit about the differences between these phones as well as the main body cameras that I use. The R8 I have used for quite a while, and some things I felt like held me back in a way when it comes to using cameras and using different cameras is part of the user interface. So it can be pretty intimidating when trying to figure out how to use a camera for the first time, especially if you're like switching between different models as well as styles or even bodies or even systems entirely. It can be really intimidating trying to overcome what to use and trying to figure out how to use your camera because you have so many different dials and buttons, screens to select that, for one, if you're not practicing it every day or getting into the nitty-gritties of just how your camera works, it can be a barrier to entry. And the other barrier to entry, which I mentioned earlier or kind of like tied into, is just spending the money on this camera gear in particular, investing a lot of money into gear that can hold people back too because they just may not have the funds at hand on the time or just the means to access it. The other thing I want to talk about is the weight consideration. There are times where I would just go out with my camera by myself and just go ahead and shoot. That's just so much easier, saves me so much more headache as well as creates less hassle because I have one piece of equipment that has 5 different cameras that I can go ahead and shoot with and also have the ability to create video. Whereas with these guys over here, I have to think about what kind of camera bag I'm using at the time, how much camera equipment I want to use at a time. That also plays into how much weight I'm going to be carrying at a given time and also what I need to sacrifice in order to carry this kind of equipment. One of my fondest memories when it came to picking out my camera equipment is going to Mount Rainier with my cousin Christian. It was an absolute blast, although it was a bit smoky at the time because there were some fires going on. We still made a really good time out of it, but there were some parts during the trip where I wish I had this kind of lens on me or different kinds of lens setup. Now, I also had to give up certain aspects of my gear, maybe like carry a couple less provisions or maybe not carry enough water or store my water differently outside of my pack, so that way if there's a puncture to the material that's enclosing the water, it's not going to spill all over my camera gear. So how I redistribute the weight in my pack and orient my pack and what kind of camera bag I'm going to be bringing along with the amount of equipment, there's a lot of much more planning that goes into creating what the ideal setup is for the kind of photography that I will be doing at a given time, which I feel like can also inhibit the speed of like what you create at and also be able to share. Now, you can't get every result every time, so there were definitely some opportunities I had to miss out when it comes to picking out my camera bag as well as the equipment. Another really good example that I can share with is going to Yosemite for Firefall, and I had to pick a camera bag that can not only sustain and keep my camera gear, my sleeping bag, my sleeping pad, my tent, my provisions, as well as spare clothes. I needed that bag that can fulfill all those needs and also protect my gear from the really cold elements that were present. So it can be hard to collect the pack that you need because that can also be a barrier to entry. I myself have the 100 Fernway 50 and I felt like that was a perfect pack to carry what I needed at the time. However, because I was also rocking the R8, I had to make a difficult decision of what kind of lens did I want to use at the time. It was, I believe, the 24 to 70 millimeter lens, and I couldn't take the 70 to 200 millimeter lens at the time with me too because it was just so big and bulky that I could not fit it within my pack comfortably enough where I know that's not going to be condensed or squeezed by the other contents within my pack. So that kind of like gave me a mental hurdle that I need to just let go and just pick one lens. I ended up going with the 24 to 70, however, because I was at a high point on the ridgeline facing Firefall, I couldn't get the amount of zoom that I needed to capture the scene in full. I wish that by having a 70 to 200, I can just focus more on the Firefall versus the scene. Although I had a one lens option, essentially during that trip, I had multiple lenses to choose from. Using this phone, I'll throw up a picture of Yosemite Firefall that I caught with this camera, and I tell you, like, it was very much worth it using this camera and body over my main body because I didn't have to worry about potentially dropping my camera or having foreign material get onto or into my camera at the very worst. The Canon R8 is not weather sealed, so that added also to the concern of just taking out the camera physically in and out of my bag while I'm hiking out there in the fresh powder. And something else I did want to talk about is just image quality between the phone as well as the camera. Phone over here, I have really good image quality and much better than I expected in low light capabilities. Granted, it can do a lot in low light capabilities, but there are definitely better options to consider, or options better to consider in a certain time and space and context of what you're shooting in. So I'll also throw up a couple images I took with my phone, and I gotta say I'm super impressed and just really happy with the results that I got over time using a phone versus using a camera itself. Using a phone in low light situations is just as good, maybe not as better, but still enough to compete with these main body cameras and different kinds of lenses that you're going to be maybe looking into or considering. The other thing I want to get into when it comes to creating with mobile photography and comparing it to using a DSLR or a mirrorless camera is just the speed and convenience of creating with these cameras. So I stuck with Samsung for a while because I was able to get some incredible trading values for the bodies that I really want. I can use these bodies really for every day. I still rock to this day the Windows or Dell Latitude 7400 2-in-1 laptop, and that has been my editing workhorse for quite a while. Granted, I've also upgraded this year to a different laptop so that way it can handle both higher demand photo and video needs. But just talking about this setup in particular and just being able to create with speed and convenience, something that I really like over the years is just using Link to Windows, which I think is a direct answer to using AirDrop compared to iPhone as well as MacBooks. If you haven't used it already, or if you're a Windows user and you're just not aware of it, let me tell you what, using Link to Windows is super awesome because it's just very much like the same thing like AirDrop. You just create your video, create your photo video file, and you can drag and drop into your phone directly and have that created for Instagram. There's a couple different softwares that I like to use when it comes to creating. I like to use mainly Lightroom Classic for desktop for much more freedom and flexibility of creating with different colors as well as different tones. I also like to use Lightroom Classic, and Classic has been one of my favorite apps to use as being a mobile shooter, and also just being able to create seamlessly on my phone and just post it up on Instagram. Another point I want to make, and that being, when it comes to creating on a mirrorless or DSLR camera, you have to export your files from your SD card into your computer, and then download it into Lightroom and then play with it, and then you have to go through the trouble or process of making your edits. So that includes going to Google Drive or saving it somewhere, exporting after creating it, and then sharing it into Google Drive or even airdropping it. You can skip most, if not all of that entirely using a mobile phone. So one of my favorite things when it came to creating on a mobile phone is having the access to Lightroom Mobile. Now, it may not be as powerful compared to Classic, but it's pretty darn good for what it is compared to Lightroom Classic's version, where it is a desktop and also the files that you have on there is local to your device. These devices using Lightroom Classic just spoke seamlessly so well with each other. So one concern I had when going from the jump between an S22 Ultra to the S25 Ultra is having to save some of my presets and my images and then importing it into my other phone. Now that is completely eliminated through the cloud-based version of just regular Lightroom and Lightroom Mobile. I didn't have to worry about like having to save my individual presets. I can just go ahead and whatever I save on here translates directly onto here, so I can definitely copy and share the same preset onto my phones. The downside that I will say when it comes to using Lightroom Mobile is you don't have the ability to create virtual copies compared to Lightroom Classic. So what I like to do, at least in my editing workflow, is create multiple copies of what I have and then just play around with different styles and different crops and see what kind of results I get. You don't have that ability when it comes to Lightroom Mobile, so that's just something to consider later on as well. Quick side note, if you heard that grinding or urring sound in the background, that is not my camera trying to focus and hunt for me, but that was actually my dad trying to grind some coffee, so that way we can go ahead and stay caffeinated throughout the rest of the week. And that's a good reminder. Go ahead and drink some coffee, treat yourself nice, wake up in the morning, because that's what certainly I'm doing. Waking up in the morning, creating some videos, so that way I can talk about what my thoughts are on this topic with you guys. That's what matters, because we're all just trying to get better at what we do. Drink coffee and drink water. Two necessities in life. There are a couple other things that I want to talk about in regards to comparing phone photography to DSLR/mirrorless cameras before I wrap up the video. Some of them are going to be a little bit minor, a little bit more obvious, but still worth mentioning at the same time. In my hand, using either the 22 or 25 Ultra, I have a finite amount of time before I have to go back and get a charge or have to wait for a charge, versus using my main camera bodies. So the Canon R8 uses a smaller battery than the Canon R6. Now when it comes to using up so much time to shoot, whether it be photos or videos, at some point I gotta pop out the battery, pop back in a new one, and I'm good to go. Versus with these guys, like I mentioned earlier, you have to wait a bit or go out with a full charge, so that way you are so much more prepared to go out and shoot. While I have these phones in my hand too, something else I did want to talk about is just the inflexibility to see different angles when it comes to taking your shot. It was hard for me to see what exactly it is I'm shooting unless I got like really low and to the same level or even lower than my phone, or I got really high over my phone to like where I'm peering over it, versus going with a main body camera. I have the ability to flip out my screen, see how I want to use it in different ways, shapes, and forms. That's one thing to consider when also looking for different kinds of shooting. Also, while I'm shooting, I do see myself much more clearly and see how I am in frame. When recording videos, can't really get that when it comes to a mobile phone, so something else to consider too. So I mentioned some benefits of using Lightroom Classic versus regular Lightroom or Lightroom Mobile. One thing that I really like about using this system is being able to take a photo, seeing what my settings are, what my RAW is, and then importing it very quickly into my Lightroom app and just making edits on the go. Some of the edits include just seeing what the 4:5 crop looks like, so that way I can see how it's framed up and how it's going to look within the center of my Samsung screen. So that's really nice to look at, whereas with a main body camera, you can't really do that. Well, yes, you can go ahead and crop within a 4:5 frame within the desktop version. It's not until you actually put it into your mobile phone that you see how it's going to look. So that's just another thing to consider. Speaking on the topic of editing, what I absolutely love and why I stuck with Samsung over all these years was the use and integration of the S Pen. So this right here, I'd say, is one reason why I love using the phone. When it comes to the video aspect of the Samsung series, what I like about it is being able to just create anywhere on the go. So although I use Expert Raw for a lot of things and just edit in Adobe Lightroom, I love using the video feature on this, as well as just being able to create videos directly within the Instagram app. I've created a lot of snowboarding videos along the way during this past snow season, and using the ultra-wide camera in conjunction with this guy over here. It's the Ulanzi, I believe MT44. I'll drop a link in the description below about what tripod model number this is, but I've used this in conjunction with this to create some really sick videos. I'll throw some up right now. As you can tell, totally a master at my craft and what I do, but that also goes to show how durable these kinds of phones are given those kinds of scenarios. So the ultra-wide camera on these things are an absolute beast, and in conjunction with something like this where I can extend out all the way, get a really nice wide of field view, and these grips on for the phone mount are pretty darn nice. So even through all the crashes and the like, how my phone rests within the tripod still holds really nicely. Like I mentioned, when it comes to the video aspect of it, it's just super easy to edit video using the S Pen. So I can go ahead and make quick and precise edits where I need to be, versus having to go into, say, DaVinci Resolve, what I currently use to edit my videos, and having to drag and drop. It can get pretty overwhelming, and there is a steep learning curve in just trying to use and understand some of the features within that system. This, in conjunction with the S Pen, super quick, easy, and convenient edits within the Instagram app, and after that, just being able to just post it however you please or whenever you please. Getting into the photography portion of it, something that I don't like doing is using my thumbs or fingers to edit, because I can't see where my cursor is right under my thumb, and then I have to play around with it, or I might make too much of an edit when in contrast I want to make something much more precise. This is really the answer to what I have, just being able to edit on the go, precise as possible, without having to worry about like where my edit is going or like where my cursor is. It's just so invaluable to me, because that way I just have so much more precision and control in hand. I've also used this to make doodles in some of my photos, so that way I can highlight, and if you haven't followed me already, Koi_Adrian on Instagram, you can see like what it is that I'm looking for when it comes to shooting my photos, and like why I'm framing certain things or how I'm using certain elements in my composition to get the best result or the result that I'm looking for. Samsung S25 Ultra, just Samsung series, are just really cool phones in general. Now, in terms of a channel update so far, the reason why I made a mobile photography video is because I'm gearing up to go to Asia later on this year. I have a couple trips planned out, like I mentioned in my intro video. A couple places I'm going to be going to, and two of which I'm going to be going in less than a month. I'm going to be going to South Korea for a week, and then I'm going to Indonesia for a week after my South Korea trip. So that's going to be really fun. I'm going to be taking you guys along the way and sharing with you over video, whether it be through these YouTube videos over time or even through my stories on my Instagram pages. It's going to be really fun just being able to explore and see a new culture. The last trip I took was Japan back in, wow, it's already 2025, Japan 2024. So it's been quite a bit since my last adventure, but I'm really prepared to go out now, share with you guys, take you guys along with me, and really just create however I please. South Korea is going to be more of a solo trip, whereas with Indonesia, I'm going to be linking up with the homies Jen and Oliver. We're going to go diving, so we're going to see what kind of crazy antics that we can get into while we are either underwater or above the water. Now, in the next coming weeks, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about how I prepare for a travel trip, so look out for videos related to that. And I'm going to take a little bit of a break from YouTube, just so that way I can go ahead and plan my content for future videos later on. I'll give channel updates along the way, both on my Instagram page as well as my YouTube page. With all that in mind, there's a lot to look forward to and talk about later on. I gotta get to creating, but if you like the video, go ahead and drop a like. Let me know what you consider when it comes to picking between mobile photography as well as just regular photography, DSLRs and the mirrorless. What do you consider? I like to really hear your thoughts about it, so that way I can see like, oh, some things that I need to look out for or just create a discussion about. So yeah, if you like the video, go ahead and drop a like. comment what your thoughts are about it, and if you haven't done so already, go ahead and drop a subscribe. That way it also lets me know that this content is worth making and that you guys really like to see this kind of content, and go ahead and stay in the loop with what I do. And on that note, I gotta get some coffee on me before I start creating the next thing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.